really appreciate the opportunity. I know everybody who's tuning in is pretty much in the same situation that I am. We've all seen our revenue stream go away. We're all having a tough time dealing with that, adapting to this new challenge that we're facing. And I thought, what better way to give back and to try to help out my fellow coaches, my fellow coaching community, by doing a webinar and trying to see if we can, perhaps just like golfers should be, just try to get ahead during this downtime. And so I'm going to talk about the type of golfer that I teach typically. I know from speaking to many of you, this is the type of golfer that we are all teaching on a day-to-day basis. I'm sure we all teach some higher level competitive golfers, but the meat of our revenue stream is coming from teaching the everyday golfer, trying to get people to break 100, break 90, break 80. And so I'm going to go through some of the patterns that I see typically on my lesson tee from day in and day out, keeping in mind that the type of golfer that I teach is typically older, typically male, and as a result, they struggle with some of exactly what you might expect: inflexibility. They want desperately to do better at golf, but they don't quite have the physical ability, the physical flexibility to be able to get there. And so how can we set up matchups for them? And I did want to talk a little bit before we get into this. There are obviously, as coaches, I think we should all have our preferences, and then situations, there will always be situations where we've got to cast our preferences aside and focus a little bit more on, okay, this player is pretty set in their ways. This player doesn't have much ability to change. And so how can I take what I know, how can I take my toolbox and start to apply that to this player to help them play better? Two very important things. I went two on two hands. That's four, but it's two with emphasis. Two very important things I think are we need to keep in mind as coaches is when a player comes to us, when a person comes to us for help, we need to, number one, we need to help them with what they're coming to us for. If someone says, I'm struggling with my driver, we need to help them with their driver. And number two, we need to keep in mind that there's this stepping stone approach that we need to build upon. And we shouldn't, I know the first lesson, I can still remember the first lesson I gave under the David Ledbetter certified instructor heading. And I thought it would be wise to try to unload everything I had learned in the previous year on this person during my 1 hour lesson. And I can only, I didn't ever see the person again, but I can only imagine it didn't go very well. And so let's keep in mind, we're trying to build here. Number one, give them what they want. And number two, let's give them just a piece of what they want. Explain where we're going to go, but give them that first building block as to what they're looking for. Okay, so let's get started. Please feel free at any point to fire off a question. Matt's going to stop me if need be, and let's make it a two-way street. I don't want this to be all about me and just, I've heard enough of my voice over the last few days, and I know my wife in the room next door is getting tired of hearing my voice talking to a screen. And so please feel free to shout with some questions. So let's get going. Here we go. Okay, the 4 super flaws. They are not super flaws, they're just regular flaws. But I would say the flaws that I see most commonly on my lesson tee, and I was talking to somebody from Ireland the other day, and I said, hey, I know the primary flaws that you see in Ireland are the same as the primary flaws we see in the US and in Canada and Australia and wherever it might be. Let's talk about these. Spread them, lightning rod, stand and deliver, harpoon. We're going to go through those. Here's the deal, okay? As I go through these, you'll most probably go, well, I know someone who's got number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4, it's very likely that a lot of the students you work with will have 2, 3, or all 4 of the flaws that I'm going to identify today. I'm going to essentially say this is a problem, and then I'm going to provide some practical advice to help everyone just perhaps work through it. Now, here's the deal. I am not a guru. I don't claim to be a guru. I like to share. I like to offer my assistance if I can. Many of you are going to have some great ideas how to overcome these particular flaws. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, I want to get better too. I'd love to hear from you. These are not the only ways to overcome these. And some of you might say, well, that's just not right. That's okay. It's okay if we disagree. We can't all have the same idea. I think that's a good thing. Okay, so let's get into it. Spread them. And you'll see in the picture on the right there, hopefully everybody can see that. This golfer is very inflexible. They haven't pivoted very much as they're winding up to the top of their backswing. Their hips, their lower back, their shoulders are not what they once were. And as a result, it's a very lifty look. They've had to use wrists and elbows to help hoist their club up to the top. Typically narrow, cuppy wrist, vertical shot, face gets kind of weak up there. And we've all seen this picture where this player from here is going to make that very steep and number 2 in the Superfloor lightning rod style downswing. The elbows are apart due to inflexibility. This trail elbow has worked in this fashion because it's more difficult, more challenging to get some of that external rotation. As we go to, let's take a look at, kind of a face-on view, and keep in mind, this is just me posing quite a while back, just me posing these positions. Sometimes I look at them and I go, well, that's better than I see a lot of people do, or sometimes it's worse. But that golfer on the right, you can see not much in the way of body movement, not a lot of depth to the pivot there. And as a result, the arms are forward, the elbows are separated, and the face is compromised. And so what can we do here to help this golfer that's relatively inflexible? And I think the first thing we've got to look at, this golfer is typically most likely going to hit pulls and fades, or if they really stand and deliver and they shove their arms out and duck the club head under late, they're going to hit some very picky blocks and flip draws. So there's a couple of different ways that golfers will respond to this type of backswing. But I do believe the thing we've got to look at here is club face is out of position quite clearly. And the center of mass, the club head, the weight of the golf club is out of position. What I'd love to see here is a scenario where we can get the club head deeper, more behind the golfer. And don't be afraid to say that. I find as golf instructors for too long, we've used the term, get the club in front of you. And really, if you look at this golfer, the club in the picture on the left, the club is in front of the golfer. I want a portion of the club. The club's long. I want a portion of the golf club in front of the golfer, not the club head portion. I want the club head portion getting behind the golfer as they get up to the top. Okay, so some basic ideas here. Now, because of the position that the club head is in, the club face is in at the top of the backswing, this player, and I know you all most likely all know this, is going to have a terrible time getting the center of mass to shallow, to move behind them in the downswing, simply because the backswing's so short, the elbows are so separated, that now they're going to have to initiate their downswing. They've got no time effectively to work the mass of the club head back in behind them. And so we've got to alter, we've got to upgrade this position up top. And it's not necessarily about getting the elbows closer together. It's about getting the club head more behind the golfer at the top. If I'm a big proponent of, I have no problem whatsoever regarding long swings. I don't mind long swings. The only time I have a problem with long swings is if the player starts to let go, and or if they start to lose structure in their arms. If the player can pivot big enough whilst keeping their hands on the grip, and they can make a long swing, I'm all for it. They're going to have a longer time to exert force on the handle, which is meaning they're going to have more time to generate club speed. These golfers we're referring to here are going to swing short. You'll notice in all three of those images, lots of pivot, lots of hip turn. Lead heel is coming up off the ground ideally. And I want players to start to get a sense of a little bit of that external rotation so that we can get the club head pitched behind them. That's really the key. We've got to set up the downswing. They're not going to have much time. Trail hand, holding on, using that lead hand position behind, inside the elbow to stop that from sneaking behind the player. Just putting your hands together or changing your grip around, I think I've seen it prove to work out quite nicely. This is a good one if you want to get some width. You'll notice in the face on picture there how I've got to stretch my arms out, get the player wider. Just get one of those stretchy bands, one of those workout bands, put it under the lead ball of the foot, have it incorporated into the player's grip, and then stretch. Get them to stretch that out. They don't swing back very far. Make them work a little bit to go and get some of that length there. Improving wrists, I think this is important. Now, the explanation I give to golfers, here's a question, Matt. If you could just answer me, can people see me?
Yep. Yep.
Can people see me, Matt?
Yes.
Oh, they can. Okay, good.
Yep.
So I'm not just demonstrating for myself here. Cool. Thank you. There's a lot of ways, different ways the wrists can work, but they're primarily going to work up. I'll go this way. Up, which is radial. Down, which is ulnar, radial and ulnar deviation. They're going to work towards the target, which is, and let's just stick to the lead wrist, which is going to create extension, and away from the target, which is going to create flexion. Don't use extension, ulnar, radial, devial. Go cupped, bowed, up, down. Okay. Now, if we want more width, if we want to get the shoulder joint, and let's keep in mind we do have forearm internal, external, and we have shoulder internal, external. Okay, we're not going to worry too much about that. Let's just focus on the shoulder at the moment. If we can get the wrists in the right spot, which is, let's go get the player to point the club straight out in front of them, where they're going to go ulnar and flex in the lead wrist. Get that lead wrist flexing, okay? And then have them wind it up to the top. It's amazing how much better the position of the club head is, how much better the club face is, and how much more likely the player is going to be to get some of that external rotation in that trail shoulder. Now, that's kind of a good picture there. You can see not so much the one on the right. I think I've started down on the one on the right. But the hips, I like the look in the legs there. Let's get these players to pivot as much as they possibly can. They need all the help we can give them to get that center of mass deep and behind them so that they can initiate the downswing, where now they're going to be able to rotate. They're going to be able to fire their body a little bit more instead of stand and deliver. And so I really like that look. For somebody that cannot swing back very far, I like that look on the left there. Okay, improve wrists. Stronger club face is the biggie. Stronger club face is the biggie. And I know this, I've spent quite a bit of time with John Sinclair, and John has most probably measured in 3D more tour players than any person ever. And John has found that in the range of 70% of all the players he's ever measured have a measure of cupping at the top. Tour players, 70% of them are somewhat cupped at the top of their backswing. on the way down, as they get to delivery where the shaft is parallel to the ground, 90+% of them have some bowing. And so we've got to find a way. Keep in mind, these players have had a job. They play golf for fun, for enjoyment. They don't get to practice nearly as much as they should. They don't get to play as much as they would like. They're physically out of shape, typically. And so how can we get them in a position where they're going to have that look coming down? They're going to have the face organized, the mass of the club head behind them on the way down. Let's make it easier for them and try to get that. Particularly if the player's inflexible, if they're gonna get cupping, if they're gonna get some of that radial and some of that flex, that club face is gonna get open. The club head's gonna stay too far in front of them, and they're just gonna have a tough time getting that club head, that club face in position. And so, yes, getting the wrists better is going to improve compression, angle of attack. It's going to shallow it out. I find I use TrackMan. I know many of you are indoors and outdoors, and so you most probably use either TrackMan or Foresight. I suppose FlightScope too. It doesn't really matter. And just a word on radar technology. Whomever you ask is going to, 99% of the time, if you say which is better, if you ask someone who owns a TrackMan, they're going to say TrackMan's better. If you ask someone who owns a Foresight, they're going to say Foresight's better. That's really just my experience. Talk to people who've used both. Talk to people who have used all types of technology, both outside and inside. I know that if I was outside, I would want to use one. And if I was outside and inside, I would want to use something else. Okay. You can figure that out. Better distance control trajectory gets the club in position. I hope that makes sense to everybody there. Number 2, lightning rod. This is a gem. You will see this if you teach golf seriously on a full-time basis like I do. You will see this every single day. Every single day I see this. Vertical shaft, club face open, cuppy wrist, just trouble. Because the player is going to have to do something magical from here. They can hit good shots. But they're never going to string together more than 4 or 5 holes of decent golf in order to start improving. And so we need to provide them with the technique necessary so that they're able to play more consecutive holes well. That's really what it's all about. How can we hit more acceptable shots and fewer bad shots? This means we have to rely on timing a lot. And when we rely on timing a lot, that makes it difficult to be. That magic word that all the golfers are after is consistency. Okay. And Matt, if you have questions, you just jump in at any point because I'm just rolling.
Yeah, I will, absolutely. So anybody who does have questions as Andrew's going along, just put those into the chat and I'll make sure they're answered.
Okay, thank you, Matt. So, ladies and gents, if you look at this lineup of players, and I love to pull out my iPad and look at swings and look at numbers while I'm on a long flight. And so here I thought, well, let's just see how many golfers I have in my database that have this. And this was, I got about into the, I think I was into the, just beyond H. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H in the alphabet. And I said, well, this is enough. I got enough. There was certainly more than this, a lot more than this. But if you look at all these positions, these are the type of positions that you see and that golfers are going to have to work some kind of magic on the way down in order to hit predictably, consistently better golf shots. Most common thing I see, lightning rod. So how can we help these poor souls? Well, I think the message I really want to communicate to them is first, let's check out, do they have a long backswing or a short backswing? If it's short, we need to get the club pretty much in that position you see on the far left side of the screen. we need to get the club head there at the top of the backswing. If they have a long backswing and they're still able to move, now I want them to make sure that that Freddie Couples move, that they've got time to get the center of mass to move up, back, and around, up, back, and behind them, so they can start to get into that second picture there on the way down. I will say this, in that second picture, my arms are too far out. I don't like that. And these are just demoed pictures that I set up myself. My arms are too far out. I'm not a big fan of that, but I am a fan of where the club head is there. We've got to work towards getting that in position. And I find most often it's a case of, yes, let's get the players set up better at the top, wherever their top might be, long or short. Let's get the players set up better at the top, and then provide them with the feel, the sensation to shallow out the club. The one thing we've got to watch for, and let me just see what the next frame, hold on, what the next frame is here.
There is 2 questions here, Andrew, whenever you want to address those.
I'm coming to you in 1 minute, Matt.
Yep.
Okay. Because I want us to all understand, we've got this line here, an early shift without tipping. Players will often, when they understand, oh, I've got to shallow this out, they'll tip their body, they'll tip their spine out. And really good players, if you look at my shoulders in the screen, you'll see how my trail shoulder is above my lead shoulder. It's going to stay that way pretty much until that shaft gets close to parallel for the last time prior to impact. If you see players tipping it out in order to get things shallow, that's not going to help them. Okay, that's not going to help them. And so take them through that, eliminate the golf ball, take them through that where they feel that better position up top, and now they're coming down and they can still maintain their body angles. They can still maintain that spine extension that's going to flex as they get later into the downswing. Matt, those questions, please.
So the first one is for the last 2 super flaws. If all else fails, would you get the golfer to flatten shoulder tilt or stand up in order to get the club behind?
Flatten. I would never want a golfer to go flatter with their shoulders. Because if they go flat with their shoulders going back, then they're going to have to tip it down, and then they get underplane, and that's a whole different mess. I would really try to avoid that at all costs. If a player is that inflexible physically, we've all taught the players that are that inflexible mentally, but that inflexible physically that they cannot get any kind of pitch inclination to their pivot, then I would start there. I would really work on that. That rope, it's like you're pulling a rope that's wrapped around an alignment rod, and you're going to get the trail side up and the lead side down. That's a good little exercise there. But I would make sure that that player understands the value of getting that inclination to their pivot. I would never go flat, never, ever go flat. I just despise that. And that, like I said, that opens up a whole different can of worms. Ultimately, we're trying to get the player to hit the ball better. We're not necessarily just trying to get the player to shallow out the club. If they shallow out the club incorrectly, they're not going to hit the ball better. They might hit it differently, but it's not going to be better. And sorry, Matt, have you got the second question, please?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to answer this now or at the end, but some of your favorite drills to fix those wrist angles.
Favorite drills to fix the wrist angles is really just trying to, that's good, thanks, Matt. Really trying to get the player to instill some of that bowing in the lead wrist, and almost where they're going to feel some ulnar, I'll go here, where they're going to feel some ulnar in the early part of their backswing. I don't mind if the player on the way back, when they're trying to get ulnar, gets the club head a little inside their hands. I think sometimes we can get a little OCD about where the club head is on the way back in the backswing. I would much rather set up an appropriate top of the backswing and thus early transition. I would much rather set that up with a backswing that doesn't look quite right, and of which there have been many. I would much rather set that up by getting the club head a little too far in and getting that bow, that flex in that lead wrist fairly early. I would try to encourage some of that. We've got to make sure though that the player is pivoting, that the player is using their feet, using their ankles, knees, hips to get some of that turn on the way back. Okay, let's keep pushing on here. Trail side bend, early downswing should have. Somebody said on one of the lockdown learning sessions I've been having, and hopefully some of you can join in on those. They really are cool. I've learned a tremendous amount on my Instagram live. It's some good learning opportunities for keen coaches. And somebody said, I think it was Mark Grace, he said, transition is the new impact. And I know it seems like about 15 years ago where impact was really cool and we had to work towards understanding impact. I feel like we've got, as a coaching community, we've got a better understanding of that. But now we need to start to understand transition and what's happening and how the player's pressuring the ground. And interestingly, I spoke with Dr. Mark Bull, who works with Sean Foley. You guys may have heard of him. Sean Foley, and he lives in Orlando. Mark Bull's from England. And he said transition is so important. And what he found was that what the wrists do in transition is largely attributed to how the body, and in particular the pelvis, works at the start of the downswing. Actually, before the downswing starts, before that club reaches the end, because the pelvis is going to start its downswing move prior to that. But I thought that was very interesting, and just in understanding some of that and understanding how that works is important. Favorite drills, really, it's let's do what we can to get the player to point the club face away from the target. If a player, most golfers wear gloves, and so let's say they've got a logo on that Velcro tab, try to get them to position their wrist in a fashion where they're not going to be able to see that Velcro tab. Even if you work a T into that Velcro tab at the base of the Velcro on their glove and get them to point that T away from the target at the top of their backswing, that's something that's going to help. It's amazing to me how there can still be slicers in the world, because it really is so easy, in my opinion. I love it when a golfer steps onto my tee and says, I've never in my life hit a draw, because I go, well, today it's going to happen. It's simply a case of let's get the club face stronger. We don't necessarily have to change the grip, strengthen the grip. I've seen very strong grippers slice it like crazy, but let's get that wrist condition and thus the club face so much stronger, and get the player to understand what it feels like, and it's going to feel excessive, what it feels like to swing from in to out, and you'll have that player hitting rope hooks in no time. I love that challenge. I think that's always an exciting moment when someone says that to me. I love that. Okay, rock skip. Here we go. This is my cousin in South Africa from a few years ago, and this guy could skip these pebbles. I'm telling you, it was like 40 times. He was amazing. And I always felt like, man, I can do that. But I couldn't do it nearly as well as him. And I thought, well, I got to check this out. I got to see how he's doing it. And so I took a couple of photos, and this is the one that I like the best. You can see he's lowered, really getting down. That shoulder is leading. He's got strongly external there. He's loaded the wrist. He hasn't fired anything. The chest is opening up. The hips are starting to open up. Look where his lead hand is. It's pulling up and out of the way. And he's going to be able to fire through beautifully and get that pebble to skip. And I'm telling you, a golf swing is not significantly different. Throwing, hitting, serving, anything like that is not overly different. Okay, stand and deliver versus harpoon, number 2 versus number 3. And oftentimes I can see golfers doing a little bit of number 3 coupled with 4, sometimes number 3, and they keep pushing that club out away from them without pulling the arms in. under there and getting that chicken wingy look like we see with Harpoon. Hopefully everyone can see why this one's called Harpoon, because it looks like the players harpoon themselves in the rib cage. Stand and deliver needs no introduction. Toe deep divots. Let's check it out. Loss of spine angle. I mentioned Dr. Mark Bull, who works with Sean Foley, and he had some interesting stuff to say on that. One of the things I asked him is, I said, Mark, have you noticed in the best players that you've measured how the center of the pelvis works? And he said everybody that he had ever measured, the center of the pelvis was further from the golf ball at impact than it was at address. I said that correctly. Further at impact than it was at address. And I will say this, there seems to be some discord there, in that some people will say, no, it should be closer. It's typically closer. Dr. Bull was emphatic in saying it's further away. I do think based on different 3D systems, there's different ways of measuring. And so that's where we get the discord there, the disparity. So I would always go for trying to get, particularly an early extender. I'm working online the last couple of days with a notorious early extender and really working on trying to get that player to feel like the center of their pelvis is almost out of the picture that you see on your screen there. Outward hand path. This is something I'm really tapping into another great Canadian golf mind on, Dr. Sasha McKenzie. Him and I have spoken at great length about this, and we both have a sense, unproven, certainly researched, but as of yet unproven, that a hand path that travels on an arc that heads inward post-impact, actually pre-impact as well, but it's more apparent post-impact, will help the player to control the face. And I think everyone, when looking at that picture on the right, you can see how the player has lost their angles, they've shoved their arms out. As a result, they've achieved what they wanted. They've got the club head back to the inside, but now they've compromised the club face, and as a result, they're going to have to rely on that timing. And so quality of strike is a challenge. It's typically picky. They don't hit down very much. But the club path on TrackMan, I know, can look pretty good. They can have it 2-3 degrees from in to out. They can hit on good days, good timing swings. They can hit nice little baby draws and make it look pretty good. But as soon as you put the pressure to them, they're going to fold like a house of cards. Not much rotation. The body is stalled. The body's had to stall because they've taken lightning rod, stood up, pushed the arms out, and that's dropped the club head in. Unfortunately, the face is messed up, and so now they're going to have to rely on flipping the face. And so a cool little sense here is, like I said, one of the things, a biggie that I'll focus on, and I'm definitely doing it more and more over the years, is trying to get the player, as they're working on this, to feel like they're pushing the center of their pelvis as far away from the golf ball as possible as they're coming down. And I want the player to feel like they're actually going to get the toe of the club up in the air. Now, this is a topic I just want to address for a second here. And it's, how do we get players, golfers, to do this? I present my information as simply as possible. I'm never going to go as deep as this with everybody. With some students, I will. But as far as practicing goes, I pitch this to just about every student. I talk about practicing on 3 levels: level 1, level 2, and level 3. What's our objective? At the start of the lesson, the objective is improved mechanics at full or faster speed. Okay, think about it. Better swings at full speed, maybe even faster. That would be cool. We've got to give the player time in a block practice mode, and I'm a big believer in block and random. I don't think it should be all of one or all of the other. I think we need both. So in a block practice mode, how is this player going to start to take ownership of the technical changes, the upgraded mechanics. Level 1 is up to the top, pause it, feel the wrists. Now the ball's on a tee. Now we're going to come down. We're going to rehearse. We're not going to hit the golf ball. Get the sweet spot almost exactly like what you see on the screen there. We're going to place the sweet spot right behind the back of the golf ball. We're going to feel what we want in impact. In this case, I'm going to have the player feel that pelvis a long ways from the golf ball. I'm going to have the player feel like the toe of the club is up in the air. That means they've got a lot of rotation, a lot of right side bend as a right-handed player. And they're going to do a lot of that. Rehearse, slow, pause, up to the top, pause, rehearse one more time, up to the top, pause, come down and tap it. And the ball might go 80 to 100 yards. They're not going to hit very many hard shots here at all. They're trying to take ownership of the changes. Level 2 is, and keep in mind, we're working towards improved mechanics first at full speed at the end. We've got to get the speed. We've eventually got to introduce the speed. If they can do it, but only slowly, it does them or us no good. Level 2, I'm going to have them go, okay, you can rehearse and pause and position all you want, but when you hit the shot, I want to see a full size motion in slow motion. This is very difficult for most people. And at level 2, the shots that the player is hitting, because they're moving so slowly, might go even shorter than it goes in level 1, but it's very deliberate. It's continuous. There's flow to it. There's some rhythm. There's no pauses. There's no breaks in the action. Level 3, we're going to start at about 3/4 speed, and slowly over time, we're going to bleed in some full speed swings. But they've got to earn their way out of level 1, earn their way out of level 2, and then earn their way to full speed when they're on level 3. I hope that makes sense to everybody. I find it's just a nice, easy way for people to picture, how do I take advantage of this information? How do I incorporate this information into my golf swing? This is a great time when people are locked away indoors and they can just hit into a net. A lot of your students, keep in mind, have got indoor setups where they can hit. Get in touch with them, reach out to them, pitch this 1, 2, 3, give them something to work on, and then say, okay, level 1, this is what I want it to look like. Level 2, this is what it should look like. And level 3, you can start to work towards full speed, because with every lesson, we've got to have, the last thing I want is someone leaving my tee being able to do something only at half speed. I want them to have a sense. They may not have full ownership, but I want them to have a sense that they can achieve this, they can do this at full speed. Okay, and there's the feel. You can see how in the left picture, the toe is down on the club head. In the right picture, the toe is certainly more up. The hands are way lower. There's more rotation. That pelvis is further away from the golf ball. That's what we're looking for there. Harpoon, out to in. I would say, you know, the harpoon, the difference between stand and deliver, stand and deliver is typically a better player than harpoon. Stand and deliver is the person who gets lightning rod and has learned that if they stand and shove their hands out, they can get the club head to the inside and actually get some power and hit some draws. Harpoon is someone who gets lightning rod on the way down and they haven't learned how to do that, and so they simply just dump the club head out over the top, and the arms running into or towards their body gives their body no room. They can't rotate anymore, because if they rotate, they're going to pitch the club head further out. That's a no-no. So under rotating here with someone who's coming over the top, lightning rod, under rotating is something that can help this player. Let's get the backswing better. Let's get the club deeper. Let's get a lot more depth to their pivot, so the arms and ultimately the center of mass can get deeper. Lack of compression, we all know that. I'm really going to go extreme. And that center picture there, well, center and the last two pictures are what I'm going to work towards with someone who I see as a harpooner. Let's get the stuff set up that's going to enable them to hit little right launching, left curving, compressed draws if they are a right-hander. And I know that's something I need to say when I'm talking to the PGA of Canada. Someone once said, you guys are about 50-50, lefties and righties. That is amazing to me. I think Derek Ingram once told me he had a little boys junior camp and he had 12 lefties. That's quite amazing to me. So I really have over the years worked on saying trail and lead, trail arm, lead arm. I need to remind myself to stick with that. But those two pictures are what I'm going to work towards. I want little shots. I want the face strong. I want the club path big time from in to out, because that's going to enable this player to be able to keep their arms extended. And let's face it, the primary reason why they're chicken winging and harpooning is because that club is so far out that the body can no longer rotate. The arms have to keep going, and the arms pass the body, and we get into that big lead arm chicken wing look there. So let's create some depth to the arms, to the center of mass on the way back, then allow the player to deliver it with an appropriately lofted club face, appropriately angled club face, get them to swing out to from in to out, and that's going to enable them to get some of that look there, which I think is so important. One of my favorite drills, everybody, is just to put a ball on a tee. I want these people who are really struggling to put a ball on a tee, peg an alignment rod in between the ball and the target, have it about 5 feet in front of them, lean the alignment rod away from them just in case they happen to hit it with a ball, and get them to start the ball outside that alignment rod and shape it. I want them to be able to shape it a lot initially, because typically, unless they're a stand and deliver golfer, they're not hitting draws. I want them to be able to launch this ball outside and really sweep it back to the target with some nice D-loft, some nice compression. I think something to keep in mind is, and I encounter this all the time, golfers believe in the cause and effect relationship. And so they believe that if you take the cause away and you explain to them, well, okay, look, you know, we've got your downswing shallowed out, but you've still got a little harpoon look. Well, that's because you've had to harpoon it. You've had to get this look, work towards, build this look on the way through to make the ball go pretty straight. If you didn't, if you actually had a good, very steep, and then you got your arms extended, the ball would go nowhere near the target. So that's you trying to get it to the target. Fix the cause, and then in turn, fix the effect. The effect doesn't walk out the door simply because we take care of the cause, in my experience. Hopefully everyone understands the difference between long swingers and short swingers. Short swingers, I need laid off. Long swingers, I will allow to go across the line. In fact, I would prefer for them to go across the line, as long as they've got that ability, that sense of getting the club head back in position on the way down. Get them to go slow. That's the level 1, level 2, level 3. There is life after technique. I was talking with Boyd Summerhays, who coaches Tony Finau, earlier today, and I was saying, you know, what kind of technical stuff do you guys work on? And he said, well, Tony will pretty much work on technique via ball flight. So if he feels like if he sees that he's hanging back, this is an example that Boyd gave, he'll get in the trees, put him in the trees with a bucket of balls and say, okay, hit shots under that. They'll videotape it. Tony's getting a lot more forward into his front foot. He's not hanging back any longer. And this all stems from that ankle injury that he had at Augusta. I think it was 2 years ago. He tends to hang back. And so they'll work on ball flight. And everybody's different. Everybody's different. The more time you spend with your students, the more you're going to start to get a sense as to, well, this really works with this player, but it doesn't necessarily work with that player. And I'm a big believer in golf IQ, the type of decisions players make, how well they understand statistics. Are they going for this shot when they really shouldn't go for that shot? Golf IQ plus your technique plus your skill. I think skill is a separate category. Players like Phil Mickelson, Bubba Watson, Seve Ballesteros, massively skilled golfers who are able to counter some of their technical issues with this high degree of skill. Get your players to work on skill hit different shots depending on their level, depending on their ability. My experience is, though, that whether they're a 20 handicapper or a 2 handicapper, everybody loves the challenge of hitting different shots. It's good fun. Come up with some ideas for your students. If they can work to develop their skill, they're also going to lower their score.
Andrew, a question.
Yes,
Your
Matt.
favorite shaft flattening on downswing drills?
I would say this. Number one, I would love for the player to get in front of the mirror. Get the club up to the top. I would love for the player to get in front of the mirror and do what they can to get the club parallel to the ground. The club's never going to get parallel to the ground. Get the club parallel to the ground on the way down so that they can go, okay, well, gee, that's parallel to the ground. That feels crazy. That feels insane. It is quite difficult to do a drill unless you're doing it very slowly. And that's why I like level 1, level 2s. To do a drill that's automatically going to shallow the shaft. A picture that I'll paint for people is, I'll say, okay, come on, let's go and find a wall. I've got some old clubs in my teaching bag. I get them to go up to the top. I place them an appropriate distance. Typically, the player's butt cheek should be about 8 to 10 inches away from the wall. Get them to take it up to the top so they don't hit the wall. And then on the way down, I want them to use their forearms, their wrists, their shoulders to get the club head on the wall. And as they come down, I want them to scrape the wall on the way down. I call that the wall scraper drill. That's going to give the player a sense, wow, that's what I need to feel. And ultimately, it's about feel. We've got to give players the right picture, the right mental imagery, so that they can start to connect that feel with hitting a golf shot out on the golf course. So I hope that answers that. I hope that gives a little bit of insight, Matt, into that question. Okay, general principles. And this is where this COVID-19 shutdown can come into play, and we can really do a number on our students. We can start to help them a tremendous amount. Come up with programs. Who knows how long we're going to be shut down for, but let's come up with, make it 5-day programs where if you just picked those 4 items that I've listed there, a 5-day program for club speed, and see what happens. A 5-day program for impact location. Come up with some creative drills. I know this, Rory McIlroy could benefit from working on those 4 things, just like Joe McIlroy living in Winnipeg could benefit from working on those 4 things. And so let's get creative and let's come up with general principles. I find that too often golfers who are passionate, they're scouring the internet looking for details, and they're looking for the details that they think they need. They think they need. Why not? Let's be proactive. Let's jump out in front of that and go, okay, everybody, we're all shut down. We've got to stay indoors. We can't get out to the golf course. Let's work on something that I guarantee you, and you can say this, if you do this properly, you're going to benefit. And so club speed, that's an easy one. Just check out Super Speed Sticks, log on there, look at some of their protocols, come up with something basic. I've got a 25 swing protocol that I give to people where they just use their driver. They make 5 right-handed swings as fast as they can, 5 lefty swings as fast as they can, 5 righties with a step, 5 lefties with a step, and then 5 righties really putting the pedal to the metal on the last 5. And I want them to do that every day, every other day, excuse me, for a month. At the end, I pretty much guarantee them 4 miles an hour. If every golfer improves 4 miles an hour, they got 10 plus yards. They got 10 yards. Not only with the driver, they've got incremental gains with all the irons. And so that's going to make a big difference. That's going to move the needle for them. Club speed, impact location. If people can hit sponge balls, mark up the face. If they can hit balls into a net, that's certainly easier. Even if they can't and they can go in their backyard, if they've got to hit indoors, ball up bits of paper and put some foot spray on the face and whack those bits of paper and play around with toe and heel and center. It doesn't all have to be center, center, center. Putting touch, distance control, those 2 are quite easy. I like to get people to put dollar bills down on the carpet and try to putt to, if you can get the ball to stop on the dollar bills or $100 bills, whichever you prefer to use, get the ball to stop and have some fun, make a game out of it. Another one for distance control is take elastic bands and put them around the sweet spot. And so if you can strike the ball right out the center of the face, now you're going to avoid the elastic bands or whatever stickies you put on the face. That's something that's going to help. Low point control. Put a business card on the carpet just in front of where you swing, and each swing you make, you've got to just brush up that business card. These are little things we can do that are going to help golfers, no matter who they are, no matter what they're doing. Let's just come up with a program for them. I really think now is a great opportunity for us to offer our services free of charge. Reach out, help people when they need it most, so that when this clears up and when we can get out, they're going to come to you and you've now got a customer for life. It really is, it's a great opportunity for us. And so in my experience as a coach, and I'll close with this before we'll take some more questions, and hopefully there will be some, I'll answer questions on just about anything. As a coach, give back as often as you can. Help out people for no reason. It's just a good idea. It's just a good idea. It's never going to hurt you. Become better at something new. I'm keen on photography. I'm trying to learn during this COVID-19 shutdown how to smoke meat. We've got a smoker, and so I've had a couple of goes, and my wife and son, I must say, have each given me a bit of a schooling. We've had a couple of grill-offs, and I've been schooled a little bit. I think it's good for us to be aware that you're going to be fired. And so that when it happens, it's not a great shock. It feels a little bit the way we're feeling now, except a little worse, because the future is very uncertain when you're fired. We know that at some point we're going to get back to our jobs. We're going to get out there, but at some point everybody is going to be fired. It will work out. I have always found that after periods of adversity, when I look back on that time period, I go, wow, I see now, I get it now. I understand why that happened to me. And thankfully, I've always been better off having been fired and moving on and finding ultimately something better. We are 100% in the people business. If people don't like hanging out with you, if people don't enjoy interacting with you, you can be the greatest coach in the world. They're not going to come back. You can give them fabulous information. They're not going to come back. And so understand that it's personality, it's interaction, it's caring, it's love. Show your students that you're thinking about them, that you love them, that you care for them. Reach out. This is a great time to do it. And you can read the rest of the screen there. Give 100% and try to separate yourself from the crowd. I've started to do a lot more YouTube vids, and I see that everybody on YouTube is doing pretty much the same videos, including myself. But you know what? That's going to change. That's going to change from here on out. I'm going to come up with some different ideas, some different themes, and it's almost as if everybody's chasing the same few keywords. Let's do something different. Let's not be normal. I find that works best if you want to separate yourselves. Ladies, gents, thank you so much. I hope I didn't bore anybody. I hope everybody perhaps picked up one or two little things that you can take and apply to your student body. If you do happen to have any questions, feel free to fire away, Matt.
Yeah, there was one question. Let me just scroll up. What's your favorite teaching aid?
An alignment rod. I love an alignment rod because I can use it in so many different ways. I know that's kind of stepping around the question, but I'm not a humongous teaching aid guy. I like an alignment rod. I want to get my students to do what they need to do more on their own, instead of having something. I'm really not a fan of. Some teaching aids encourage students to make the move to do what they need to do, whereas others seemingly place the person, the golfer, in that position. I'm not a fan of those. I would much rather my student be able to do it without a teaching aid. That being said, my buddy Martin Chuck, fellow Canadian, one of my best friends in the world, he's a teaching aid guru, and I've seen him have tremendous success with his teaching aids.
Any other questions out there, guys? Just put them in the chat.
Guys, I'm sure you can hear me say it loud and clear, but come on, let's step up to the plate. Let's be a shining beacon in these trying times. Reach out to people, post stuff, tell them your story. They're having a hard time, you're having a hard time. That's okay. But it's amazing when in times of difficulty, when you can reach out and lend a helping hand and go, hey, I'm here for you. Come on, let's talk. Even if you pick up the phone and talk about golf, who do you think is going to win the Masters? Well, what's going to happen with Tiger this year? Who knows? And just be there for people. I really think we have a great opportunity at the moment. And I'll tell you what, it helps us, it distracts us, and we can put our head on the pillow at night and feel pretty good.
The questions are pouring in now, Andrew. Draw or fade, or does it matter?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, particularly if you have speed. If you don't have speed for the regular everyday golfer, I'm going to go draw. But if we're talking competitive golfer, it does not matter.
What ratio of block practice versus random practice when working with students?
That's a great question. I would say it depends on the individual. Do they have an event coming up? If they have an event coming up, I'm going to strongly favor randomization. If they're coming off of a break, and for example, at this time, I would pile people into block practice simply because we don't know. We know that we've still got some time in lockdown. We know that we've still got some time, but let's work it according to the person's situation, according to the person. I know some people do better with more block. Other people seem to get bored and do less better with when they have a higher percentage of block. Tailor it to the individual, tailor it to the golfer, the person's situation pertaining to their events, member guest event, whatever it is.
How often do you find the everyday golfer has the wrong club setup or fitting, and what's your best approach for addressing this?
I would say 95% of the time there is a problem at some point in their bag. Maybe higher. Maybe higher. There's always a problem, ranging from a 13-degree 3-wood to players having a 56-degree wedge and a 58-degree wedge in the same bag. These are kind of things where I go to, how did this happen? How did this happen? And so I point people. One thing I learned is I can't be good at everything, and I really don't try to be good at everything. And so another great Canadian product is my friend Ian Fraser at TXG. I would rate Ian as the best fitter in the world. And so I'm going to I refer a lot of my students to Ian. Many of them will make the trek up to Toronto to go and see him there. But as golf instructors, we need to know more pertaining to equipment. We don't know enough. I had a student the other day who went for a fitting. I had sent them to a very good place, the place I send most of my students to, and he swings a 7-iron at 93 miles an hour, and he came back with the TaylorMade, I think it's the 760, those little kind of hot face irons. And I honestly was shocked. I couldn't believe that he would come back with clubs like that. And this is not really a competitive golfer. He's a good golfer. He plays off a one handicap, but he doesn't really compete. And I said, why did you get those? He said, I hit them 6 yards longer. And I said, so now you hit a 7-iron like 190 yards instead of 185? And he was like, yeah. I said, what's that going to do for you? And so we just, as golf coaches, we need to dig a little deeper when it comes to equipment. I find too often we're eager to tell people stuff that we think might be right. Wedges need to be a little flatter typically than the rest of the set. Let's get tons of loft in the fairway woods. Let's know which players should get face flex technology irons and which ones should never get face flex technology irons. Basically that. Also, I did want to mention, I think something that's very, very important, and it's going to become more and more important down the road, and that is statistics for the everyday golfer. I think statistics are invaluable. I've just started using, and this is not meant to be a plug for Arccos. I know it's going to come across that way, but I've just started using Arccos for my own clubs, for my own game, and it's incredible after 11 rounds, the amount of data that I have. Every shot I've hit has been recorded for the last 11 rounds. And I can see that if I'm going to work on my game, I need to, number one, improve my club speed. I need to get faster. I don't gain enough strokes off the tee because I'm too short. Uh, and I need to chip better. I've always viewed myself as a good chipper. I need to work on my chipping and pitching. I need to chip better. And so for a coach to be able to have access to that kind of information for each of their students is, to me, invaluable. Not only is it to the golfer, but once you bring a coach into that, not to mention going for a fitting. If you go for a fitting and you've got 20 rounds of golf in there, the fitter should be able to look at that data and go, I see what you need. I know exactly what you need. You don't want to go left. You do want to hit the ball higher. You do want to hit the ball longer. And they can pretty much fit your set of clubs from that information. It's something I would encourage everybody to check out. What else we got, Matt? Are you there, Matt?
Sorry, I had myself on mute there.
Okay.
Day to day, what do you work on the most with your students?
I would say I work the most on club face and better short game. Better people are not good with the wedges in their hand, be it pitching or chipping. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there that golfers have soaked up over the years and are still holding on to. So as a result, they're doing what they're trying to do. It's just unfortunately wrong. And so we need to change their concept and give them a little different picture as to what they should be doing. And club face. If I can improve somebody's club face, we're going to improve the shape of their shots. We're going to improve the distance of their shots. We're going to improve the compression. We're going to improve the trajectory. And so all of those things will really fall into it. And club face is grip, wrists, and how we get that club head positioned in the downswing.
If you're at a private club, what would be one program that you would host?
I would do a couples session. I thank God that I'm not at a private facility, and I know a lot of people are. I'm thankful to not be at a private facility, but I would come up with some kind of a wine and dine practice session where we tied it all together and come up with different themes. And I think it would be a way for spouses to bring their spouse along to something that's a lot more informal, a lot more friendly, and that way we could actually grow the game. I think we could get a number of golfers out that would typically not come out, and you get two couples coming together perhaps, and most often where the two wives don't play that much golf, but their husbands are going to bring them along and they get to hit a few shots and listen to a story or two and maybe get a little bit of instruction, and then have a glass of wine and just have a good time.
Yeah, that's great. I love this question for you, Andrew. What recommendations, excuse me, would you have for a young professional who's teaching full time? People to learn from, personal experiences, and materials to seek to be best for our students.
You got to work hard. You got to work hard. And here's the deal. You're teaching full time, which means you're spending a lot of time on the lesson tee. I know this. I said to my wife the other day, I've been doing these 2 lockdown learning sessions each day and 3 on some days, along with a few webinars. And I'm like, man, I'm ready for a break. You know, I haven't taught a lesson in about 10 days and I'm ready for a break. What's the deal? But ultimately, it takes a lot. You got to work your tail off. And so it's not just teaching lessons. You've got to go home. You've got to get online. You've got this magnificent resource available to you called the internet that I never had when I was a young pro. And so as a result, it was wasted. People will often ask me, Andrew, who's your mentor when it comes to coaching? I say it's the internet. It's the internet. I've learned more from the great people, great coaches on the internet who share their information freely than I've learned from just being face to face with anybody. And so you've got to dive in and you've got to position yourself in the right spot where you can listen to and watch the best coaches out there. I'm telling you this, if you go home and you spend 1 week online, be it Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you're going to be able to pick up who the 10 best people are. You can see it. You just gotta look through it. You gotta sift through it and pick out those 10 people and follow them and watch and read and listen to everything they say, because they're really going to help you a lot. And then when you have some time, when you have an opportunity and they're coming to a PGA of Canada coaching summit, you got to make sure you're there. You got to make sure you're there. And if you can go and shadow them coaching, please do that. Canada has some amazing coaches, and I know they're only too gracious with their time and to be able to help.
I want to be mindful of your time. I know it's 10 past the hour, so maybe we'll end off. Lots more questions here, but how much do you refer to the use of the ground and pressure shifts?
It's important. It's important, Matt. But my experience is this. I want a player to use the ground in order to generate club speed. Okay. I want them to be able to get that club head moving, and a lot of that's going to come from using the ground properly. We've got lateral, we've got vertical, and we've got rotational. And there are very few players on the planet who are going to be able to tap into all 3. The more a player moves laterally, the less they're going to be able to work rotationally, and vice versa. And so oftentimes you'll see players be fairly good in 2 categories and not very good in the 3rd category. A lot of that is dictated by where their arms are, how the club face is positioned, and where the club head is positioned. And so there's so many different matchups there. And I know when I first got involved, I'm a Swing Catalyst ambassador. And I know when I first got involved with Swing Catalyst about 10 years ago, I was always looking for what should it be like? What should this pressure trace look like? And there is no one pressure trace. There's players that have their ideal and preferred pressure trace and that pressure trace is going to allow them to generate the most speed with the most club face control, and that's the best combination. But there really is no one way to do it. Obviously, we get to the top, we get some extension. It's almost like we're loading up, and now we're going to unweight ourselves. We're going to sink into the ground, and it's at that point, fairly early into the downswing, where we're going to exert the most force, and we're going to get that vertical push and hopefully a little bit of rotation in there. Players should really, whatever's lacking, if you've got 2 out of 3, then you should start to work towards the other one just to keep it neutral. Otherwise, you can get too much bias.
That's awesome. Andrew, on behalf of everybody on the webinar and the entire PGF Canada, I want to thank you for giving your time up and your expertise. And based off the comments that came in here, it was a great time for our members as well. So thank you.
Oh, Matt, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for reaching out. I was quite surprised as to how few PGA sections actually took me up on my offer. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to yourself and your members. And I would just encourage everybody to pay it forward, if not now, at some point, and do what you can to help out.